She was a healer forged in the crucible of military medicine, a battlefield surgeon who traded the shriek of rockets for the whimper of the forgotten. Yet she was cast out for an act of mercy. She sought to build a sanctuary for the voiceless, a place of healing and soft blankets, but unearthed a secret so dark it threatened to consume the very city she had sworn to protect. Now, the life she fought to save is the evidence that will get her killed. Tell us where you are watching from in the comments below, so we can pray for you and your family. For in the face of darkness, the light of community is our strongest shield. The rain fell on Seattle with a quiet, relentless persistence. Not a storm, but a state of being. It slicked the asphalt of the alley and beaded on the thin fabric of Dr. Aris Thorne's discarded lab coat, the one with the embroidered logo of Paws Global, a company that had, 6 hours ago, been her employer. Now it was just a sodden reminder of her failure. Her hands, steady enough to set a shattered bone or suture a delicate artery, trembled as she checked the makeshift carrier at her feet. Inside, 6 tiny forms huddled together, their breathing shallow, their whimpers barely audible over the city's hum. Parvovirus, the shelter had claimed. A death sentence. But Aris knew better. She had seen the lab reports they tried to bury, the ones that spoke of cellular degradation, inconsistent with any known canine virus. It was something new, something engineered. And the vials in her pocket, the ones she had liberated from a locked refrigerator in the Paws research wing, were not a cure. They were an antidote, an admission of guilt chilled and stored in glass. A security guard's shout echoed from the end of the alley. Heavy footsteps followed. She wasn't just a disgraced veterinarian anymore. She was a thief, a fugitive. The weight of it settled in her bones, as cold and heavy as the Seattle mist. She pulled the carrier closer, a fierce, protective instinct overriding the tremor in her hands. These weren't just puppies. They were witnesses. They were her legacy of defiance against a corporate machine that saw life as a variable in a profit equation. She had to get them somewhere safe, somewhere the long, polished arm of Silas Vance and his corporation couldn't reach. But in a city of glass and steel, where every corner had a camera and every transaction left a digital footprint, sanctuary was a fleeting illusion. The footsteps grew louder, closer. 2 of them, hired muscle, not cops. Their movements were too confident, their presence a suffocating pressure in the narrow space. Aris pressed herself against the cold, wet brick, her mind racing, cycling through tactical options learned in a different life, a life before veterinary medicine, when her patients wore combat boots and the wounds were from bullets, not neglect. There was no cover, no exit, a kill box. The irony was a bitter taste in her mouth. She had survived 2 tours as a ranger medic, only to be cornered in a garbage-strewn alley over a box of dying puppies. The first man rounded the corner, a bulky silhouette against the hazy city lights. He moved with the easy arrogance of a predator who knew its prey was trapped. "Dr. Thorne," he said, his voice smooth and utterly devoid of warmth. "Mr. Vance would like his property back. Let's make this easy." Aris's chin lifted, a single sharp movement of defiance. Her voice, when it came, was low and steady, a promise of violence she prayed she could keep. "You'll have to take it." The second man appeared, flanking the first, effectively sealing the alley. They didn't draw weapons. They didn't need to. Their size and certainty were weapons enough. The first man took a slow step forward, his smile a thin, cruel line. "We can do this easy," he repeated, his tone dropping into a placating rhythm one might use on a spooked animal. Or we can do this hard. The choice is yours. The outcome is the same. Aris's mind was a whirlwind of calculations. The dumpster to her left was heavy, but maybe, just maybe, she could tip it. The fire escape was too high to reach. Her medical bag contained scalpels, syringes, tools that could be turned into weapons. But against two trained men, it was a desperate, likely final gambit. Her gaze flicked past them, to the mouth of the alley, to the indifferent city beyond. And that's when she saw him. A shadow detaching itself from other shadows. A man and a dog. They stood just under the sputtering orange glow of a street lamp, motionless, watching. The man was tall, lean, with the kind of stillness that is learned, not natural. It was the stillness of a hunter, of a soldier in the hide. The dog at his side, a dark-furred Malinois, was a mirror of its master's coiled intensity, its head cocked, its gaze fixed on the unfolding drama. For a heartbeat, Aris thought they were with the goons, a third and fourth man moving in to complete the trap. But there was a difference, a profound difference in the way they held themselves. The men in front of her were thugs. The figure at the end of the alley was a weapon. He wore civilian clothes, jeans, a dark jacket, but they hung on him like a poorly fitting disguise. His posture, the set of his shoulders, the way his eyes methodically scanned the entire scene, taking in her, the men, the environment, all spoke of a discipline forged in places far harsher than this rain-slicked alley. The first goon noticed her distraction and glanced over his shoulder. His arrogance faltered for a fraction of a second. "Get lost, pal. This is private business." The man in the shadows didn't respond. He simply took a step forward, into the light, and the dog moved with him, a seamless extension of his will. Now Aris could see his face. It was hard, etched with lines that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with experience. His eyes were a pale, piercing grey, and they held no warmth, no pity, only a chillingly calm assessment. "The lady seems to be in distress," he said. His voice was quiet, a low baritone, yet it cut through the damp air with absolute authority. The second goon chuckled, a harsh, ugly sound. "She's a thief. This doesn't concern you." The man, the operator her training screamed at her, shifted his gaze from the goon to Aris, then down to the carrier. A flicker of something crossed his face, too quick to name. Understanding? Recognition? He looked back at the men. "It concerns me now." He gave a command, so soft it was almost a whisper, a single word in a foreign language. The Malinois moved. It didn't bark, didn't growl. It flowed forward like black water, a silent, terrifyingly fast predator. The dog didn't attack. It simply placed itself between Aris and the two men, lowered its head, and emitted a rumble that was less a sound and more a vibration, a promise of savage, unrestrained violence that vibrated up through the soles of their expensive shoes. The goons froze. All their bluster, their physical confidence, evaporated in the face of such primal, controlled lethality. They were bullies, used to intimidating civilians. This was something else entirely. This was a guardian. Kai watched the scene with an icy calm that had been drilled into him over a decade of operating in the world's darkest corners. On leave, they called it, a time to decompress, to transition back to the civilian world. But for him, the world was never truly civilian. It was just a different kind of battlefield, one with unspoken rules and hidden threats. The fog of peace was more disorienting than the fog of war. In combat, the objective was clear. Here, in the grey labyrinth of Seattle, purpose was a ghost. He and Odin, his canine partner, walked the city at night, two displaced warriors searching for a quiet that never came. The dog, a four-legged operator with more confirmed saves than most medics, was the only creature on Earth who understood the tension coiling in Kai's gut. Odin felt it too. The lack of a mission left them both adrift. Then they had turned a corner and found one. A woman, cornered. Two predators circling. A box of something small, something she was protecting with the fierce desperation of a mother defending her young. Kai's mind processed the data with detached efficiency. Woman, military bearing, visible tremor in hands, likely adrenaline, not fear. Defensive posture, a fighter, assailants, hired muscle, overconfident. Their positioning was sloppy, creating a fatal funnel. The dog at his side, Odin, felt the shift in his handler's breathing, the subtle tension that signaled a change from observation to action. Kai didn't need to speak. Their connection was deeper than words, forged in the dust of Afghanistan and the jungles of South America. Odin knew the mission profile before it was given. When Kai gave the soft command, Vakt, the Norse word for guard, Odin moved with the fluid precision that had made him a legend in the teams. He became a living barrier, a four-legged wall of muscle and teeth. The two men took an involuntary step back. Their eyes, which had been fixed on Aris, were now locked on the 75 pounds of restrained fury standing before them. The taller one, the leader, tried to regain control. "That's a nice dog you got there," he said, forcing a casual tone. "Be a shame if something happened to it." It was the wrong thing to say. Kai's expression didn't change, but a coldness emanated from him that was more menacing than any overt threat. "There are two ways this ends," Kai said, his voice still quiet, still calm. "The first is you walk away. The second is you get carried away. The choice is yours. The outcome is the same." He was throwing the man's own words back at him, a tactical move to unbalance him, to show him that his script had been stolen. The man's face flushed with anger. He was used to being the one in control. This quiet, unassuming man with the demon dog had stripped him of his power without laying a hand on him. He made a fatal mistake. He let his ego make the decision. He lunged, not at Kai, but at Aris, thinking to grab the carrier and run. It was a clumsy, telegraphed move. Kai didn't even seem to shift his weight. One moment he was standing 10 feet away. The next, he was a blur of motion. He intercepted the man's lunge, his hand clamping down on the man's wrist. There was a sharp, sickening crack of bone. The man screamed, a high, thin sound of agony. The second goon, seeing his partner drop, hesitated for a split second. It was all Odin needed. The dog surged forward, not to bite, but to impact. He hit the man squarely in the chest, a canine battering ram that knocked the wind out of him and sent him stumbling back into a pile of overflowing trash cans. It was over in less than 5 seconds, efficient, brutal, silent. Kai released the first man, who cradled his shattered wrist, his face pale with shock and pain. The second was struggling to breathe amidst a cascade of garbage. Kai hadn't drawn a weapon. He hadn't raised his voice. He had simply neutralized the threat. He was a weapon without a target, and he had just found one. Kai's attention shifted immediately from the neutralized threats to the woman. Aris. She was still pressed against the wall, her knuckles white where she gripped the carrier. but her eyes were wide with a new kind of shock. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. She had seen that kind of economy of motion before, that terrifying fluid grace. She was looking at a fellow professional, a warrior from her own tribe, albeit a far deadlier branch. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod towards the moaning men. They won't be a problem for a while. He then looked at the carrier. What's in the box? His tone was direct, not accusing. It was the voice of a man who needed intel, not backstory. Aris hesitated for a moment, the instinct to trust warring with the hard-learned lesson to trust no one. She looked from his impassive face to the magnificent dog standing calmly at his side, its earlier menace gone, replaced by a focused attentiveness on its handler. The dog was the deciding factor. No one who fights alongside an animal like that, with that level of trust and symbiosis, could be truly malevolent. "Puppies," she said, her voice hoarse. "They're sick. I'm a vet." He absorbed this information without comment. His gaze swept the alley again, noting sightlines, potential exits, and the growing possibility of police arriving to investigate the noise. "This area is compromised," he stated simply. "We need to move." He didn't ask if she wanted his help. He didn't offer it. He stated it as a fact, a mission parameter. He was taking command of the situation. A part of Aris, the Ranger NCO who was used to giving orders, bristled. But the pragmatic, exhausted part of her, the part that knew she was out of her depth, was flooded with an overwhelming sense of relief. She nodded. "My truck is a few blocks away. If I can get to it—" "No," he cut her off. "They'll be looking for it. They'll have the plate. We go on foot. My vehicle is closer. It's clean." He turned and gave another soft command to Odin. The dog immediately fell into a perfect heel, his eyes constantly scanning, taking responsibility for their rear security. Kai picked up Aris's discarded medical bag, his movements economical and precise. He looked at her. "Can you carry the box?" She nodded again, her throat tight. He led the way out of the alley, moving with a purpose that carved a path through the indifferent city crowds. People instinctively moved aside for him and the dog, sensing the invisible bubble of intensity that surrounded them. They walked in silence for 3 blocks, a tense, mobile unit. Aris found herself falling into step just behind his right shoulder, a position she had taken 1,000 times on patrol. It felt unnervingly natural. Kai's truck was a nondescript, dark grey pickup, the kind that disappears into any parking lot. It was clean to the point of being sterile inside, with no personal effects save for a well-worn harness and leash on the passenger seat. He opened the rear door of the extended cab for her. "Put them on the floor, keep them warm." As she carefully settled the carrier, one of the puppies let out a weak, painful cry. Aris felt a fresh wave of despair. The antidote needed to be administered in a sterile environment, with supportive care she couldn't provide on the street. "They're fading," she said, her voice cracking. "I need supplies, a clean space. I don't know where to go." Kai started the truck, the engine turning over with a low rumble. He pulled out into traffic, his eyes checking the mirrors with methodical frequency. "I know a place," he said. It wasn't a question or a suggestion. It was a solution. He was her guardian now, a protector who had emerged from the shadows. The place was a small, isolated cabin, nestled in the dense evergreen forests an hour outside of Seattle. It was a sanctuary built of rough-hewn timber and quiet resolve, a fortress against the noise of the world Kai had left behind. A winding gravel road, easily watched and defended, led to the clearing where it stood. As they pulled up, the truck's headlights cut through the thick mist, illuminating a simple, well-kept structure with a wide porch. Odin, who had been resting his head on the center console, alert to every mile they traveled, was instantly on his feet, his tail giving a single, stiff wag. Home. Inside, the cabin was as Spartan and functional as its owner. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, with a neatly stacked pile of wood beside it. The furniture was simple, solid wood. The only personal touches were a framed photograph on the mantelpiece of a younger Kai with a different dog, and a bookshelf filled not with novels but with manuals on everything from diesel mechanics to advanced field medicine. It was a warrior's refuge. Kai pointed to a heavy wooden table in the center of the room. Set them up there. He started a fire in the hearth with practiced efficiency, the dry tinder catching quickly, casting a warm, dancing light across the room. The sudden warmth was a stark contrast to the chilling dampness that had seeped into Aris's bones. "I need to boil water," she said, already shifting into triage mode, her earlier desperation replaced by a focused, professional calm. "And clean towels, antiseptics, IV lines if you have them." Kai nodded, already moving. "Medical kit is in the bathroom cabinet, top shelf. It's fully stocked." Aris found not just a medical kit, but a trauma surgeon's dream. It was military grade, filled with supplies that no civilian would have a reason to own. IV bags, catheters, sutures, sterile dressings, and a range of pharmaceuticals. She looked at the neatly organized contents, then back at Kai, who was now laying out clean towels on the table. An unspoken question hung in the air between them. "I was a SEAL," he said, answering the question she hadn't asked. "Odin was my partner." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. It explained everything: the tactical mindset, the lethal efficiency, the well-stocked medical arsenal. It also explained the quiet pain she saw in his eyes, the look of a man who had seen too much and was now searching for a peace he might never find. For the next 2 hours, they worked in near-perfect sync, a silent, efficient team. Aris prepared the antidotes, her hands finally steady as she drew the precious liquid into syringes. Kai held each tiny, shivering puppy, his large, calloused hands surprisingly gentle, murmuring soft words of encouragement as Aris found a vein and administered the injection. Odin lay by the hearth, a silent sentinel, watching the entire procedure with intelligent, concerned eyes. He seemed to understand the gravity of the situation, the fragility of the small lives in their care. As the last puppy was treated and settled into a warm box lined with towels near the fire, Aris finally allowed herself to sag with exhaustion. She sank into a chair at the table, the adrenaline that had sustained her for hours finally draining away. Kai handed her a steaming mug of coffee. "They're stable," she whispered, watching the puppies. Their breathing was already less labored, a faint touch of pink returning to their gums. "You saved them." Kai shook his head, his gaze fixed on the fire. "You saved them. I just cleared the path." The silence that settled between them was comfortable, the kind shared by people who have faced a common enemy. "They'll come for you," Kai said, his voice a low rumble. "The men in the alley were just the first wave. Who is Silas Vance?" Aris wrapped her hands around the warm mug, the heat a small comfort against the returning chill of fear. "He's the CEO of Paws Global," she explained, her voice flat. He's a philanthropist on the outside, a monster on the inside. Omnipaws runs dozens of city animal shelters as a tax write-off. It gives them access to a steady supply of test subjects. The ugly word hung in the air. These puppies weren't sick with parvo. They were the subjects of an unsanctioned, illegal trial for a new cellular regeneration drug. Something went wrong. It started killing them. The antidote I took is proof they knew the risks. It proves they created the poison. Kai's knuckles were white where he gripped his own mug. He was a protector of the innocent, a guardian of the helpless. It was the core of his being, the oath he had sworn. And this Silas Vance had violated that oath in the most despicable way. "This isn't just about stolen medicine," Kai said, his voice dangerously quiet. "This is about a legacy of cruelty. And he's not just hunting you to get his property back. He's hunting you to erase the evidence. And that includes you." The fire crackled, spitting a shower of sparks. Outside, the forest was dark and silent, but for the first time since she'd been fired, Aris felt a sliver of hope. She was no longer just a fugitive. She was part of a pack, and they were in a sanctuary, guarded by a warrior and his dog. The next morning, the mist had burned off, replaced by a crisp, clear dawn that painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. The quiet of the mountains was a stark contrast to the storm brewing back in the city. Aris had slept for a few hours on a couch near the fire, a fitful, dream-haunted sleep. She woke to the smell of coffee and the sight of Kai staring at a tablet computer, his face illuminated by its cold, blue light. Odin lay at his feet, occasionally nudging his hand for a reassuring scratch. The puppies were stirring in their box, their whimpers stronger now, more demanding. It was the sound of life returning. "He's already making his move," Kai said, without looking up. He turned the tablet towards her. On the screen was a local news alert. A picture of Aris, a professional, headshot from her Omnipaws employee file, was plastered next to a headline, "Disgruntled veterinarian sought in connection with theft of dangerous narcotics." The article, quoting an Omnipaws spokesperson, painted her as an unstable, recently fired employee who had stolen a shipment of potent, controlled substances. It was a carefully crafted narrative designed to discredit her before she could ever speak. If the police found her, they wouldn't be looking for a whistleblower. They'd be hunting a dangerous drug thief. Silas Vance wasn't just coming after her with thugs. He was turning the entire city against her. "He's building a cage," Aris said, her voice hollow, "cutting off every avenue of escape." "Every cage has a key," Kai replied, his focus absolute. He swiped through several screens, bringing up satellite maps, architectural blueprints, and encrypted chat logs he was pulling from the dark web. Silas Vance, former venture capitalist, moved into biotech and pharmaceuticals a decade ago. His public persona is impeccable. Galas, charity donations, animal welfare advocate. His private dealings are less clean. He pointed to a name on the screen. "His head of security is a man named Marcus Thorne. No relation?" "No," Aris said, shaking her head. "I've never heard of him." "Ex-Delta," Kai continued, his voice grim. "Now runs a private security firm that specializes in corporate problem-solving. The men in the alley were his. They were amateurs, the first string. The next team he sends won't be." The implication was clear. The next team would be operators. Men like Kai. The thought sent a fresh wave of ice through Aris's veins. They were in a defensible position, a sanctuary, But no sanctuary was impregnable. Vance would not stop. He would escalate until the problem, her, was solved. Permanently. "We can't just hide here," Aris said, her resolve hardening. "He has the data, the original research. It's all stored on a central server at Omnipore's tower downtown. If I could get to it, I could prove everything." Kai looked up from the tablet, his grey eyes meeting hers. He saw the fire in them, the same refusal to surrender that he recognized in himself. She wasn't just a victim, she was a soldier. "It's a fortress," he said, not as a deterrent, but as a statement of fact. Biometric security, round-the-clock surveillance, armed guards, thorns, people. "I know the layout," Ares countered. "I know the network protocols. I designed part of their data security system when I first started. I can get in, but I can't get past the guards." "That's my department," Kai said simply. A silent understanding passed between them. The mission had changed. They were no longer running. They were no longer hiding. They were going on the offensive. They were going to dismantle Silas Vance's empire from the inside. The protector was becoming the hunter. He stood up and walked to a heavy steel locker in the corner of the room. He spun a combination lock and opened it. Inside, nestled in custom-cut foam, was the other side of his life. A matte black rifle, suppressors, magazines, a sidearm, body armor, and an array of tactical gear. Odin, seeing the locker open, rose to his feet, his body language changing instantly. The calm companion was gone, replaced by the focused, alert K9 operator. He knew what the open locker meant. It meant they were going to work. Kai began to methodically check his equipment, his movements practiced and efficient. It was a ritual, a quiet preparation for the violence to come. "Vance made a mistake," Kai said, his voice low as he chambered around. "He thought he was hunting a stray. He didn't realize he was kicking a hornet's nest." The plan was audacious, bordering on suicidal, but it was their only play. A direct assault on Omnipore's tower, a gleaming monument of glass and steel in the heart of Seattle. It was Vance's sanctuary, his throne room, and they were going to tear it down. They spent the day preparing. Kai drilled Aris on entry and exit routes, memorizing blueprints he'd acquired. He gave her a crash course in tactical movement, in how to use cover and concealment, how to read the flow of a firefight. She was a fast learner, her ranger training, long dormant, snapping back into place. Her hands, which had trembled in the alley, were now steady as she field-stripped and reassembled the sidearm Kai had given her. While Kai focused on the physical infiltration, Aris worked on the digital one. Using a hardened laptop from Kai's arsenal, she began probing the Omnipore's network, searching for the backdoors and vulnerabilities she herself had warned them about years ago, warnings that had been ignored by an arrogant IT department. They were a two-person assault team, a perfect fusion of brains and brawn, of digital warfare and physical combat. Odin moved between them, a silent, watchful presence. He seemed to sense the shift in the atmosphere, the coiled tension of the pre-mission brief. He would be their point man, their early warning system, and, if necessary, their most lethal weapon. As night fell, they loaded the truck. The puppies, now much stronger, were secured in a heated carrier, destined for a trusted contact of Aris's, a no-questions-asked veterinarian who ran an off-the-grid rescue deep in the mountains. They couldn't be part of the coming battle. This was a mission for the Guardians, not the innocent. Driving back towards the city, the mood was tense and quiet. The glittering skyline of Seattle once a symbol of hope for Aris, now looked like an enemy fortress. "Vance's office is on the top floor," Aris said, her voice tight. "The server room is in the sub-basement. We'll need to hit both. I need to access his personal terminal to launch the data dump. It's the only one with the master encryption keys." "We go top-down," Kai decided. "More risk on entry, but it gives us the advantage of surprise and gravity on the way out. They'll expect an attack from the ground, not the sky." The sky was the roof of an adjacent building, 50 feet lower than Omnipaw's tower. The gap between them was a 40-foot chasm of wind and open air. Kai parked the truck in a multi-story garage several blocks away. They geared up in the darkness, the quiet clicks of buckles and magazines sliding into place the only sounds. Kai moved with a familiar grace, the weight of his armor and weapons settling on him like a second skin. Aris felt clumsy by comparison, but the solid feel of the body armor was reassuring. When they were ready, Kai turned to her. In the dim light, his face was a mask of calm focus. "Stay behind me. Listen to my commands. Do exactly as I say. We get the data, and we get out." He placed a hand on Odin's head. The dog looked up, his devotion and readiness absolute. "Vakt," Kai whispered. "Guard," and then, "Suck. Seek." With Odin taking the lead, his paws silent on the concrete, they moved into the city's dark underbelly. Two warriors and their canine partner, ready to bring the war to the doorstep of a king. The night air was cold, but inside Aris, a fire was burning. It was the fire of righteous anger, of a protector who would not back down. She was no longer a victim. She was a weapon, and she was about to be aimed at the heart of the man who had wronged her, who had wronged so many innocent lives. The battle for the soul of the city was about to begin. The ascent to the rooftop was a silent, vertical crawl, up service ladders and fire escapes, a climb through the city's forgotten spaces. Odin moved ahead of them, a shadow scouting for threats, his senses 1,000 times sharper than theirs. He would pause, look back, and wait for Kai's hand signal before proceeding. They were a perfectly synchronized unit. Reaching the precipice of the adjacent building, the full scale of their challenge became apparent. Omnipaw's tower loomed over them, a sheer cliff of dark glass. The wind whipped through the urban canyon, a mournful howl. Below, the city was a river of light, oblivious to the drama unfolding 40 stories above its streets. Kai uncoiled a rope from his pack, a thin black line of high-tensile cable. On one end was a grappling head. He produced a compact pneumatic launcher. "He'll hear this," Aris said, her voice barely audible over the wind. "No," Kai replied, his focus on calculating the trajectory. "It's suppressed. They'll hear a cough, nothing more." There was a soft thump and the hiss of compressed air. The grappling hook shot across the chasm, a dark projectile against the city lights, and bit into the concrete parapet of the target roof with a solid, reassuring thunk. Kai tested the line, putting his full weight against it. It held. He attached a climbing harness to the line, and then to Odin, who stood perfectly still, trusting his handler completely. He clipped the dog onto the line and, with a soft command, sent him across. The dog slid down the taut line, a dark shape moving through the night, landing silently on the far roof. A moment later, he reappeared at the edge, looking back, signaling all clear. Kai went next, then talked Aris through it, her heart pounding as she launched herself into the void, trusting the rope, trusting the man on the other side. They were in. The roof access door was, as Aris predicted, secured with a simple electronic lock. Her stolen keycard, which should have been deactivated, still worked. "Hubris," she whispered, as the lock clicked green. They never thought anyone would get to the roof to use it. The stairwell was dark and silent. They descended 2 floors, emerging into the hushed, opulent corridor of the executive level. The air was climate-controlled, smelling faintly of expensive leather and air freshener. It was the sterile, lifeless atmosphere of corporate power. They moved like ghosts down the hallway, Odin in the lead, his claws making no sound on the plush carpet. He paused at a set of large oak doors, pressing his nose to the crack at the bottom, and then looking back at Kai, motionless. "Company." Kai held up 2 fingers, 2 hostiles. He motioned for Aris to hold position behind a large potted plant while he and Odin stacked up on the door. He used a fiber optic scope to peer under the door. 2 guards sitting at a security console, watching monitors, bored. One was drinking coffee. This was the moment, the transition from stealth to violence. Kai gave Odin a series of subtle hand signals. Isolate 1, subdue, no lethal. He took a deep breath and kicked the door. It burst open, slamming against the interior wall. Before the guards could even register what was happening, Odin was on them. He moved with blinding speed, leaping onto the chest of the first guard, knocking him and his chair over backwards. The dog didn't bite, but his weight and the shock of the impact were enough to completely incapacitate the man. At the same time, Kai flowed into the room, closing the distance to the second guard before the man could even reach for his sidearm. Kai's movements were a blur. A strike to the throat, a sweep of the legs. The guard collapsed, gagging, unable to draw breath or make a sound. The entire engagement took less than 3 seconds. 2 hostiles, neutralized, no alarms raised. Aris entered the room, her own weapon up, scanning the other angles. Her gaze fell on the bank of monitors. Dozens of camera feeds showed empty hallways, silent labs, and the main lobby. And then she saw it. A dedicated monitor showing a thermal image of the roof. 2 bright signatures had appeared there just moments ago. "They know we're here," she breathed. "The roof has pressure plates, an older system, but it's active." An alarm began to chime, not a loud siren, but a discreet, insistent beep from the security console. On the monitor, red icons began to move, converging on their position. An elevator was already ascending. "Thorne's team," Kai said, his voice calm, betraying no alarm. "There, good. Time to move. Get to the terminal. Buy me as much time as you can." Aris didn't hesitate. She ran to the massive mahogany desk that dominated the office, Vance's throne. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, bypassing the initial login screen with an old administrator password she knew they'd be too lazy to change. The system was fighting her, firewalls and security protocols springing up like digital walls. But she was faster, her knowledge of the network's architecture giving her an edge. Behind her, she could hear Kai preparing for the inevitable assault. The heavy desk was dragged across the floor, creating a barricade. A quiet click as he armed a flashbang. "Odin, Vakt," he commanded. The dog took up a position near the door, a low growl rumbling in his chest. The elevator chimed its arrival in the hallway outside. A moment of silence, then the sound of soft, tactical footsteps. They were here. 5 seconds, Aris muttered, her eyes locked on the progress bar of the data transfer. The files were massive. Research data, financial records, incriminating emails. A whole legacy of corporate evil, downloading at a painfully slow crawl. Outside the office, a voice called out, calm and professional. Kai, I know that's you. Marcus Thorne. We served together in the 22nd. Stand down, man. You don't want this. Kai remained silent, his weapon trained on the door. He knew Thorne, knew his reputation. He was good, he was ruthless, and he was loyal to whoever signed his paychecks. This wasn't a soldier anymore. He was a mercenary. He's just using you, Kai, Thorne's voice again. This woman is a wanted fugitive. Whatever she told you is a lie. Walk out of there, and we can talk. Transfer at 50%, Eris said, her voice strained. They're trying to hack me out. I'm losing control of the system. The door exploded inward, blown off its hinges by a breaching charge. Smoke and debris filled the room. Kai was already moving, firing 3 controlled shots into the swirling smoke, forcing the entry team to take cover. A flashbang arced through the doorway. Cover! Kai yelled. He ducked behind the desk, pulling Aris down with him. The world went white and silent for a terrifying second. Through the ringing in her ears, Aris could hear the clatter of boots entering the room. Odin launched himself through the smoke, a fur-covered missile of righteous fury. A man screamed as the dog latched onto his gun arm, dragging him to the ground. Muzzle flashes lit up the smoke-filled room. Kai rose from behind the desk, a shadow in the chaos, and returned fire with deadly precision. He wasn't aiming to kill, but to disable. Shots to knees, shoulders. The professional soldiers of Thorne's team cried out in pain and surprise. They had expected a cornered operator, not a whirlwind of controlled violence. 75%, Aris yelled, trying to reacquire the terminal through the haze. A bullet ricocheted off the desk, inches from her head. She flinched, but held her position. She was a soldier again, holding the objective under fire. She could feel the heat from the laptop's overworked processor. The system was about to crash. Come on, come on. From the hallway, Thorne's voice cut through the gunfire. Fall back. Plan B. Contain them. The assault team withdrew, dragging their wounded. The immediate threat was gone, but the silence that followed was even more menacing. What's Plan B? Aris asked, her breathing ragged. They'll lock the whole floor down, Kai said, reloading a magazine with swift, practiced movements. Cut the power. Pump in gas. They're not trying to capture us anymore. This is a kill box. 99%. Eris breathed. A final click. Transfer complete. It's sent. It's in the cloud, routed through a dozen anonymous servers. He can't erase it. They had won. They had the evidence. But their victory felt hollow as the lights in the office flickered and died, plunging them into emergency lighting. The ventilation system hissed to a stop, replaced by a new, more sinister hiss coming from the vents. Gas, Kai confirmed, pulling 2 small rebreathers from his pack. He handed one to Aris. We have maybe 5 minutes before this room is uninhabitable. We have to go. Now. They had come in from the top. Now their only way out was down. 40 stories of hostile territory, with Marcus Thorne's elite team hunting them every step of the way. The sub-basement server room was their unlikely sanctuary. After a harrowing descent through darkened stairwells, evading patrols that swept the floors with methodical precision, they had reached the building's digital heart. The gas had been confined to the top floors, a desperate gambit by Thorne to contain them. But it had also created chaos, forcing an evacuation that gave Kai and Aris the window they needed to slip through the tightening net. Here, surrounded by the quiet hum of servers, The air was cold and clean. Odin paced the perimeter of the room, a restless guardian, while Aris worked at a terminal, initiating a final command. "This will wipe their local servers clean," she said, her fingers a blur on the keyboard. "They'll have backups, but it'll take them days to restore. By then, the data I released will be on every news network in the world." Kai stood watch at the reinforced steel door, listening. The building above them was no longer silent. The distant, muffled sounds of alarms and shouting had been replaced by the organized sweep of a professional team. They knew where the server room was. They would be here soon. "We're trapped," Aris stated, not with panic, but with a flat acceptance of their tactical reality. "They control the only way out." "There's always another way out," Kai replied, his eyes scanning the room. He pointed to a large ventilation duct near the ceiling. "Where does that go?" Aris pulled up the building's schematics on her screen. Her eyes widened. "It's an old system, predates the new construction. It vents out into the city's old subway tunnels. They're abandoned, but they connect to the main sewer lines." It was a dirty, dangerous, and desperate exit. It was perfect. The sound of heavy bootsteps echoed in the corridor outside. They were here. "Go," Kai ordered, helping Aris up towards the vent cover. "Get the grate off. I'll hold them." Odin stood beside him, hackles raised, a low growl emanating from his chest. As Aris worked frantically at the rusted bolts on the vent cover, the assault team began trying to breach the door. The first heavy thud of a battering ram echoed through the room. Thud. The steel door buckled slightly. Thud. A hinge groaned in protest. "It's open," Aris yelled, pulling the heavy grate free. She peered into the darkness, a black hole that smelled of dust and decay. "Kai, let's go." Thud. The lock shattered. The door flew open, and 3 armed men in tactical gear poured in, fanning out, their weapons raised. They stopped dead. Kai wasn't there. The room was empty, save for the humming servers. Then they heard it, a low whistle from above. They looked up just as Kai dropped from a network of pipes on the ceiling, landing directly behind them. Before they could turn, he was on them, a phantom of controlled violence. He moved through them like water, a series of precise, disabling strikes. A rifle was wrenched from stunned hands, an elbow was hyperextended, a knee was buckled. Odin, who had hidden with him, became a blur of fur and teeth, creating a diversion, snapping at ankles and wrists, keeping them off balance. It wasn't a fight. It was a disassembly. Within seconds, the 3 elite soldiers were on the ground, groaning, their weapons scattered. But more were coming. They could hear Thorn shouting commands in the hallway. "Time to go," Kai said, grabbing his pack. He boosted Aris into the dark vent, then Odin. He was about to follow when a figure appeared in the doorway. Marcus Thorn. He didn't raise his weapon. He just stood there, his face a mixture of anger and a strange, grudging respect. "You always were a ghost, Kai," he said. "Just disappear. I'll tell them you got away. Take the win. Go." Kai paused, half in the vent. "And let Vance walk. Let him find new puppies, new victims? No. This ends tonight." Thorn sighed, a weary sound. "His new lab? It's not here. It's at his private estate on the lake. He's probably there now, watching his empire burn, already planning his next move. Go. Finish it." It was an unexpected gift, a piece of intel from an old comrade, a final professional courtesy. Kai gave a short, sharp nod of thanks, then disappeared into the darkness of the vent, pulling the grate closed behind him. They had escaped the kill box, but the mission wasn't over. They had won the battle for the data, but the war against the man responsible had one final personal confrontation left. The Silas Vance estate was a monument to arrogance, a sprawling mansion of glass and stone. Perched on the edge of Lake Washington, it was a fortress disguised as a home. High walls, motion sensors, and roving patrols of Thorne's men made it even more secure than Paws Tower. But Kai had an advantage. He had the element of surprise and the knowledge that Vance, feeling the walls close in, would be cornered and unpredictable. They approached from the water. A small, inflatable raft with a muffled electric motor carried them across the dark, placid lake under the cover of a moonless night. They were a silent triad. Kai, the warrior, Aris, the avenger, and Odin, the hunter. They beached the raft in a secluded cove, hidden by weeping willows. The air was still and cold, the only sound the gentle lapping of water against the shore. "The lab is in the boathouse," Aris whispered, pointing to a large, separate structure at the end of a long pier. "It's where he does his most sensitive work. It's completely isolated from the main house." "He'll be in the house," Kai reasoned, "watching the news, talking to his lawyers. The lab is our objective." They moved through the manicured gardens like wraiths, Odin gliding ahead, his dark coat making him nearly invisible. He would freeze, signaling the position of a patrol, and they would melt into the shadows, waiting for the guards to pass. They were ghosts, haunting the edges of a rich man's sanctuary. The boathouse was locked, but the simple lock was no match for Kai's tools. Inside, the sterile chemical smell was overwhelming. It was a state-of-the-art laboratory, filled with gleaming stainless steel equipment. And in the center of the room, a row of cages. They were filled with more puppies, dozens of them, beagles, shepherds, terriers. All of them had shaved patches on their legs where IVs had been inserted. Some were whimpering, others were terrifyingly still. Aris let out a choked cry, her hand flying to her mouth. This was the source, the factory of suffering. "We have to get them out," she said, her voice thick with a mixture of rage and sorrow. As she moved to the cages, a voice crackled from a speaker in the ceiling. "Touching, isn't it? The good doctor, always so concerned with her furry little patients." The lights flashed on, blindingly bright. Silas Vance stood on a catwalk above them, looking down with a smug, superior smile. He was dressed in an expensive suit, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He was the very picture of calm, insulated evil. "I must admit, I underestimated you, Dr. Thorne." "And you," he said, his gaze shifting to Kai. "You've been a considerable nuisance, but all good things must come to an end." Below him, doors slid open, and 4 of Thorne's men filed in, weapons raised. They were trapped. "It's over, Vance," Aris said, her voice shaking with anger. "The data is out. Everyone will know what you are." Vance chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. "People have short memories. A scandal, a fine, a generous donation to a new animal charity, and it all goes away." "But evidence," he said, gesturing to the puppies, then to them. "Evidence can be permanently disposed of. No witnesses, no crime." He took a sip of his whiskey. "Kill them, and euthanize the assets." The guards raised their rifles. Kai pushed Aris behind a heavy steel table, shielding her with his body. This was it, the final stand. But before the guards could fire, a new voice cut through the tension. "Stand down." Marcus Thorne stood in the doorway, his own weapon raised. But it wasn't pointed at Kai. It was pointed at Silas Vance. "It's over, Silas. The police are on their way. I just made a full confession. Vance's face contorted in a mask of fury. You traitorous fool, I own you. No, Thorne said, his voice hard. I was a soldier, and tonight I remembered what that means. We protect the innocent. We don't execute them for money. Vance, enraged, pulled a small pistol from his jacket and fired, not at Thorne, but at the cages. A puppy yelped in pain. In that instant, something broke in Kai. This wasn't a tactical problem anymore. It was personal. He gave Odin a single, sharp command. Apport. It meant attack. Odin exploded across the room, a black streak of vengeance. He leapt, not for the armed guards, but for the catwalk. He sailed through the air, jaws snapping, and latched onto Vance's gun arm. The CEO screamed as he was dragged over the railing, tumbling to the floor below with a sickening crunch. The fight was over. Justice, in the end, had been delivered by a 75-pound dog who knew, with perfect moral clarity, the difference between right and wrong. The sun was rising over Lake Washington, casting a golden light over the water. The Vance estate was swarming with police cars and news vans. The puppies, including the one with a minor flesh wound, were being carefully loaded into animal control vehicles, bound for a real sanctuary where they would be cared for and adopted. Their future was bright. Silas Vance, his arm in a sling and his arrogance shattered, was being led away in handcuffs, his empire crumbling around him. Marcus Thorne was talking to a detective, his face grim but resolute. He had crossed a line, but in the end he had chosen the right side. Kai and Aris stood on the lawn, watching it all unfold. Odin sat at Kai's feet, leaning against his leg, a quiet, steadfast presence. The long night was over. "What will you do now?" Aris asked softly. Kai looked down at the dog, then out at the rising sun. The fog of leave, the feeling of being a weapon without a target, had finally lifted. "I think," he said, a rare, small smile touching his lips, "we've found a new mission." He was a guardian, a protector. He had found his purpose not on a foreign battlefield, but in a rain-slicked alley, in a mountain cabin, in the heart of a city that needed heroes. He had found a new pack. Aris reached down and stroked Odin's head, her touch gentle. "We both have," she said. She was a healer, and there was so much healing to be told. Done. Together they would build a new legacy, one of loyalty, courage, and unwavering protection for the voiceless. The world was still a dangerous place, but now it had two more guardians watching over it. We hope this story of loyalty and courage has inspired you. True strength is not in the power to harm, but in the will to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Comment Amen below if you believe in the power of loyalty and second chances. God blesses you and your families, always.